April 1945. Berlin was collapsing in fire and smoke. Whispers rushed from mouth to mouth. The Americans were advancing from the west, the Soviets from the east. Inside a makeshift camp near the Rhine, I, a 22-year-old German woman, sat huddled among dozens of others. None of us knew what fate awaited. That morning, American soldiers appeared. They ordered us into line. My legs trembled as I tried to walk, haunted by the rumor I'd heard for weeks. Before execution, prisoners are fed well, bathed, even groomed, so they can meet death in a clean and presentable state. The thought made my chest tighten and my breath shallow. We marched along a rough dirt road, past bomb-shattered houses. I could hear the clatter of heavy boots, the foreign rhythm of English words I could not understand. The spring sun burned above us, but in my heart it was still night. When the heavy wooden door creaked open, I braced for a courtyard of executions or a chamber of interrogations. Instead, what lay before me was something I could not comprehend, a beauty salon. A large mirror gleamed on the far wall, chairs upholstered in leather, lined up neatly, shelves of bottles and jars sparkling under the lamps. A faint fragrance floated in the air. Sweet, floral, utterly foreign to the stench of smoke and mildew I had lived with for months. I froze. Was this part of the final ritual before death? Would they make us clean and beautiful, only to lead us outside to the firing squad? My skin prickled at the thought. A female American soldier gestured for me to sit. Her eyes were not filled with hatred, but with cautious curiosity. Her hand rested lightly on my shoulder, guiding me toward the chair. I sat stiffly, heart pounding, my teacher's voice echoing in my head. Americans are barbarians. They will never treat an enemy with kindness. Yet here I was, in a salon meant for women of comfort, not prisoners of war. The fear did not vanish. It only shifted into a heavier question. If this is not death's prelude, then what do they want from us? I looked around. Other women were seated too, some with wide, bewildered eyes, some already in tears. The hiss of running water from the wash basin, the rhythmic snip of scissors, the squeak of combs through tangled hair filled the air. Ordinary sounds, yet they pressed on my chest like a weight. I closed my eyes, and in the darkness I saw my mother in Hamburg, rinsing our hair with cold water drawn from a bucket, hands red from scrubbing with ash instead of soap. I saw my younger sister's thin, brittle hair falling out in clumps, and I, a defeated prisoner, was about to have my scalp massaged with warm water and scented oils by the very enemy we were taught to despise. Shame burned in me. Tears welled up, slipping down my cheeks. And then, a drop of lavender-scented shampoo touched my scalp, cool and fragrant. The scent spread around me like a veil. I shivered, not from cold, but from the unbearable contrast. Something inside me cracked. That fragrance, ordinary for them, was enough to make the great wall of belief I had carried since childhood begin to crumble. And that was only the beginning. The warm water running through my hair carried me back, as if each drop unlocked a memory. Suddenly, I was no longer in that salon. I was walking once more through the streets of Hamburg before the war, back when life still seemed ordinary. I remembered 1938. I was 15, skipping through the market square. The air was full of the smell of smoked sausages, fresh loaves of dark bread, baskets of apples and pears. My father still kept his little bakery then, and my mother used to say, "We are not rich, but we are comfortable enough." I believed her. Those days I had no idea how quickly it would all vanish. When the war began, it felt distant at first. Victories in Poland, in France, The radio broadcast spoke triumphantly of a new German age. In school, teachers told us Americans were starving, tearing down their movie sets for wood, their women gaunt and miserable. They are weak, my teacher declared, while we Germans endure. Our spirit is unbreakable. I believed every word. How could I not? It was painted on every poster, shouted from every loudspeaker. But by 1943, reality closed in. Food rations shrank until they fit into the palm of my hand. A slice of bread, a few potatoes, perhaps a thin soup. Sugar was a memory, butter, a dream. My mother gave her portion to me and my sister, insisting she had eaten at the market. I knew she was lying, but what could I do? I swallowed each bite, my throat tight with guilt. Clothes fell apart faster than they could be mended. The blue dress I once loved was cut shorter, patched so many times the fabric no longer matched. Shoes were replaced by wooden clogs with rubber scraps nailed to the soles. Posters screamed from the walls. Sacrifice for the Führer is the highest honor. Loudspeakers barked. True beauty is patriotism. Abandon vanity. Makeup is betrayal. I would look at my hollowed cheeks in the mirror, my rough hands, and tell myself, this is the beauty of a true German woman. But hunger mocked those words. I saw neighbors collapse on the street from weakness. I saw children with swollen bellies from malnutrition. Bombs rained from the sky, driving us underground night after night. In the shelters, we huddled together, whispering prayers while the world above us burned. And still the radio claimed, America is collapsing. Victory is certain. At 18, I volunteered for the National Service for Women. I thought I would be helping soldiers, perhaps working as a nurse. Instead, I cleaned, carried, and sometimes handled bodies. No medicines, no morphine, only endless orders to endure. Yet I clung to belief. If we suffered enough, surely we would win. Surely the sacrifices would mean something. But now, sitting in a salon chair, hair lathered in fragrant suds, my hands soaking in warm water, the absurdity of it all struck me with painful clarity. My mother was likely still in Hamburg, rinsing clothes with ash and freezing water. My sister probably hid her chapped hands inside torn sleeves, and here I was, a prisoner, a defeated woman, having my hair massaged with lavender shampoo by the very enemy I was taught to fear. Shame pressed down on me. How could I deserve this when my family still starved? How could this be the reality when everything I had been told painted America as filthy, broken, destitute? I wanted to believe it was a trick, some elaborate performance to weaken us. But deep down, I knew the truth. The truth was not whispered on radios or plastered on walls. The truth was in the warm towel wrapped around my head, in the sweet fragrance that filled my lungs. The truth was that everything I had believed in was beginning to collapse. And it all started with something as small as a drop of shampoo, something I had once been told Americans didn't even have. The sound of artillery still echoes in my mind, pounding like drums against my chest. It was March 1945 when the Western Front finally shattered. Rumors had spread that the Americans had crossed the Rhine. Families fled in panic, but there was nowhere left to run. Roofs collapsed, homes smoldered, the streets filled with smoke and rubble. I had been assigned to a makeshift aid station along with other women. But it was no hospital. We had no syringes, no medicines, only dirty bandages and a few bottles of disinfectant almost empty. Wounded soldiers lay on the floorboards, blood pooling beneath them. Boys not yet 20 groaned for water. All I could do was press fabric against their wounds and whisper prayers. We had been told, German spirit can endure anything. Yet looking at those pale faces, I knew spirit alone could not replace bread or morphine. Then came the heavy thud of boots. The wooden door burst open. Tall figures in unfamiliar uniforms filled the room, steel helmets glinting, rifles raised. My heart stopped. Every word I had ever heard about Americans flashed in my mind. They are savages. They will show no mercy, least of all to women. For us, there will be no fate but death. The bandage slipped from my hand. I dropped to my knees. Beside me, another woman screamed, covering her head. The air was thick, every second stretched to eternity. I shut my eyes, bracing for the gunfire, but it never came. Instead, one soldier lowered his rifle, gesturing with his hand for us to stay calm. His voice was steady, firm, yet not cruel. Then a man stepped forward, a translator. He spoke in my own language, words I never expected to hear. You are not to be executed. You will be taken to a camp, given food and shelter. I stared at him, uncomprehending. My hands clutched at my torn collar, waiting for the trick to reveal itself. But instead of bullets, I heard the metallic click of a can being opened. A strange smell filled the room, rich, salty, meaty. An American soldier held out a tin filled with pink slices of meat glistening with fat. I froze. It had been years since I'd seen meat. My body ached with hunger, but my mind screamed, "It's a trap." Another woman beside me grabbed a piece, shoved it into her mouth, and immediately began to weep. Her thin shoulders shook as she sobbed, overwhelmed by the taste. I couldn't resist. My hand trembled as I lifted a piece to my lips. The flavor burst across my tongue, salty, fatty, real. It was the taste of life itself, something I thought had vanished forever. Tears filled my eyes. The next day, they marched us out of the ruined town to a field camp, tents lined up neatly, American soldiers moving briskly about. Each step I took felt like walking on the edge of a cliff, waiting for the illusion to collapse, for the cruelty to begin. But it never did. Never. Instead, they handed us soft white bread spread with butter, a mug of steaming coffee sweetened with sugar and milk. One woman burst into tears, crying, 2 years! It has been 2 years since I've seen white bread. That night I lay on a thick blanket, clutching a metal spoon that still smelled faintly of butter. Sleep did not come. My mind circled the same question again and again. If they planned to kill us, why waste all this food? Why give us comfort? And deep inside me, a fragile light flickered. Perhaps everything I had been taught about them was not true. The first days in the POW camp were like living in a dream, half wonder, half nightmare. Each morning, American soldiers carried trays of food I had never imagined possible. Soft white bread, golden butter spread thick, deep red strawberry jam glistening in the light, square slices of ham, a tin of peaches in syrup, and always a steaming cup of coffee sweetened with condensed milk. I stared at the tray, frozen. For years, I had thought myself lucky to swallow a bowl of watery soup with a few scraps of cabbage. Yet here, the food seemed endless. I whispered to myself, it cannot be real. They are playing a trick. But the aroma was too strong, my stomach too empty. The first bite of buttered bread melted on my tongue and brought tears to my eyes. Back in Germany, my family had shared one meager loaf stretched over days. I remembered my mother carefully slicing a single apple into 4 thin pieces for us to divide. Now, I watched an American guard casually toss half a slice of bread into a garbage bin as if it were nothing. My chest tightened. Was this abundance real, or just a cruel show to break us? On the 3rd day, they gave each of us a small personal kit. I untied the string, opened the bag, and my hands shook. Inside lay items I hadn't seen in years: a brand new toothbrush with gleaming white bristles, a comb with tight teeth, a thick towel twice the size of any I had owned, and, most astonishing of all, a bar of fragrant soap wrapped in clean paper. I cradled the soap as if it were a jewel. My family had once shared a single chipped brush, passed from child to child. Soap at home had been a lump of harsh gray lye that stung the skin, and yet here each woman had her own fresh supplies. I turned to the translator and whispered, "Must we return them when finished?" He laughed and shook his head. "No, they belong to you." That night I pressed the soap to my chest as I slept, terrified it would vanish by morning. Another woman hid a crust of bread under her pillow, still unable to believe the meals would continue. Scarcity had carved so deeply into us that abundance felt more like danger than safety. On the 5th day, we were led to the communal washroom. There, my breath caught. From the wall jutted shiny pipes with metal handles. With a twist, hot water poured out endlessly. Steam clouded the ceiling. I had grown used to heating a single bucket over a fire, barely enough for one person. Here, warmth flowed without limit. An American nurse handed me a glass bottle filled with a clear liquid. "Shampoo," she said with a smile. I tilted my head in confusion until she gestured for me to pour some onto my hair. When the liquid foamed into white bubbles, spreading a sweet fragrance across my scalp, I trembled. All my life, ash water had served for both laundry and bathing. The idea of a product meant only for hair seemed impossible. As I rinsed, I noticed another scene that seared itself into my memory. A soldier, after shaving, tossed half a bar of soap directly into the trash. Instinct seized me. I rushed forward, retrieved it, dried it carefully, and tucked it into my dress. The translator caught my eye and asked why. I answered softly. In Germany, a woman could walk a whole day just to find a piece of soap like this. He said nothing. His silence was louder than words. That night, I lay awake, my body wrapped in the fragrance of soap, my mind consumed by turmoil. My teachers had told me the Americans were poor, desperate, broken. But now in my hands, I held evidence of the opposite: soft towels, sweet-smelling shampoo, white bread, butter, meat. Each item cut like a blade into the wall of lies I had lived within. I asked myself, if this is true, what else have I been deceived about? The day they led us to the special building is burned into my memory, as if it happened yesterday. An American guard gestured for me and several other women to follow. My heart pounded with dread. Whispers returned to my mind, the same whispers that had haunted me since capture. Before execution, prisoners are bathed, given food, and allowed to feel clean one last time. My knees trembled as we walked across the camp yard. But when the door swung open, what I saw stunned me. It was no ordinary washroom. Inside, a beauty salon had been set up. Clean mirrors lined the walls, chairs with padded seats stood in rows, and the air carried the unmistakable scent of flowers and soap. Bottles of colorful liquid stood on counters. Brushes and scissors gleamed in the light. It felt like stepping into another world, far removed from the mud and blood of war. I froze at the threshold. This had to be an illusion. Why would our captors waste such luxury on us? A guard gently motioned me forward. My feet moved reluctantly, as if every step might trigger a cruel trick. A nurse in crisp white uniform smiled and guided me into a chair. She draped a soft towel around my shoulders. My body stiffened, waiting for humiliation, for mockery. But instead, she touched my hair with gentle fingers, parting it carefully, speaking softly in English words I barely understood. Warm water streamed over my scalp, followed by a sweet fragrance. She lathered my hair with shampoo, massaging my head in slow, soothing circles. My eyes filled with tears. I hadn't felt such tenderness in years, not since my mother used to wash my hair as a child, long before hunger and fear became our daily bread. I bit my lip to keep from sobbing. Next came the scissors. Locks of my tangled, brittle hair fell away. I watched them scatter across the floor, each strand a remnant of suffering. When the nurse held a mirror before me, I hardly recognized the reflection. My face framed by a neat cut, my hair smooth and shining. For the first time in so long, I looked almost human again. But it didn't end there. Another woman approached with small bottles of nail polish, delicate brushes, and a smile that was neither mocking nor cruel. She gently filed my broken nails, shaping them with care. Then she painted them a pale pink, the color of blossoms in spring. My hands trembled as I stared at them. These were not the hands of a starving prisoner, but of a woman reminded of her dignity. Finally, they brought creams in little jars. The nurse dabbed some onto my cheeks, massaging it into my skin. It smelled faintly of roses. The sensation was so foreign, so indulgent, that I felt ashamed. I thought of my sister back in Germany, her cheeks hollow, her lips cracked from cold wind. And here I was, a prisoner with skin that now glowed under foreign hands. The guilt cut into me almost as sharply as the relief. The other women around me reacted in different ways. Some laughed nervously, unable to contain their astonishment. Others cried quietly, shoulders shaking, as hair was combed, as nails were cleaned. One whispered, "This must be the end. They are preparing us for death." Okay, so I knew the thought well. It had been mine too. Yet as the minutes passed and no guns appeared, a different truth began to settle inside me. When they finished, they handed me a clean dress. It was simple but whole, without patches or holes. I slid it on, and the fabric embraced me like a second skin. For years I had worn only rags. Standing there in front of the mirror, I looked less like a prisoner and more like the young woman I once was. Stepping outside into the sunlight, I almost staggered. My hair smelled of flowers, my nails shone faintly, my skin felt smooth. Yet inside me, a storm raged. If this was mercy, it was unbearable. Why would an enemy care for us this way? Why not mock us, starve us, kill us as we had been told? Each act of kindness tore down another brick in the wall of lies I had lived behind. That night I could not sleep. The scent of shampoo lingered on my pillow. The smoothness of my nails caught my eye again and again. I thought of the propaganda lessons. Americans are crude, dirty, barely surviving. Yet here they had given me a gift my own nation had long denied me, the gift of feeling like a woman again. Lying awake, I realized the truth was as clear as the reflection in the salon's mirror. The war was not just about weapons and bombs. It was about dignity, about the lies we were fed, and the humanity we were denied. And in that moment, with polished nails and freshly washed hair, I understood. My captors had given me more than comfort. They had given me back my identity. After the beauty salon, I thought I had reached the peak of shock. Surely nothing could surprise me more. But the days that followed proved me wrong. Each detail I noticed in the camp cut deeper into the crumbling wall of beliefs I had carried all my life. Every morning, our meals mirrored those of the American soldiers themselves: golden fried eggs, crisp strips of bacon, slices of white bread spread with butter and jam, and steaming mugs of strong coffee sweetened with sugar. I had once thought survival meant swallowing thin porridge. Here, meat and fruit were served daily, as if they were ordinary. One morning, I watched a young American woman bite into a fresh apple, eat half, and casually toss the rest away. My heart clenched. Back in Germany, my mother once sliced a shriveled persimmon into 4 pieces to share among us. Here, a whole apple was discarded as if it were nothing. The shock did not stop at food. One afternoon, a nurse handed me a brand new pair of white socks, soft and thick. I touched them in disbelief, remembering the pair I had worn back home, patched 10 times over, barely holding together. I asked timidly, "Do I return them later?" The translator chuckled. "No, they are yours. When they wear out, you'll get another." His words left me speechless. At home, families often shared one pair of socks until they could no longer be mended. Here, replacements seemed endless. Soon after, I saw trucks arrive, unloading crates of boots, hundreds, maybe thousands of pairs, all identical and new, their leather still smelling fresh. A friend of mine, once a schoolteacher, whispered as she counted under her breath, "This shipment alone must be over 5,000 pairs." Her face went pale. I understood her silence. She was calculating what this meant. If the Americans could supply just one small camp with so many boots, their factories must be producing beyond imagination. No slogan, no propaganda could explain this away. But the hardest truth came with the waste. One day, I saw a female soldier wash her face, then throw away half a bar of soap into the trash. My instincts overpowered me. I rushed forward, picked it up, dried it carefully, and hid it under my dress. When the translator noticed and asked why, I whispered, "In Germany, a woman might walk all day just to find a piece of soap this size." He looked at me for a long moment, then turned away silently. I felt like both a thief and a survivor. Even the camp's discarded trash felt like treasure to me. I collected empty tin cans, washed them out, and stored them like valuables. To me, they could become rice containers, cooking pots, even roofing for a broken house. To the Americans, they were nothing but scraps. The shame of it burned in me, but so did the revelation. Had all our suffering been in vain, built on lies? Another day, I was taken through the medical tent. Inside, rows of refrigerators hummed, filled with glass vials. A doctor opened one and through the translator explained, "Penicillin, even for small cuts." My body went cold. I had watched so many German soldiers die slowly from infection, their wounds festering for lack of medicine. Yet here, the Americans had enough to treat the smallest scratch. My lips bled as I bit them, rage and despair mixing inside me. We had been told that spirit, the German will, was our greatest weapon. But what was spirit against penicillin, against factories producing shoes by the thousands, against food that seemed limitless? Day after day, the evidence piled higher. Every bite of buttered bread, every crate unloaded from a truck, every piece of soap tossed into the bin was another nail in the coffin of the world I had once believed in. None of this could be staged. It was too vast, too consistent. This was reality, and that reality declared a harsh verdict. Germany, bled dry by its leaders, could never hope to match this abundance. We had given up our sons, our fathers, our homes. We had been starved, deceived, and sacrificed, all for a lie. Weeks passed in the camp, and the fear of sudden execution finally faded. Yet what replaced it was even more unbearable. The emptiness inside me as the foundations of my belief collapsed one by one. At night, I often sat in the corner of the barrack with a stub of pencil and paper the Americans had given us. They told us we could write letters to send home when the war was over. And deep down, I knew those letters would never be delivered. But I wrote anyway, as if pouring words onto paper could keep my mind from breaking. "Dearest Mother," I began one night, my hands trembling, "you would not believe it. I have bathed in hot water, with soap that smells of flowers. They feed me meat. They give me white bread soft as clouds. I have my own toothbrush, my own towel, and you in Kyoto." I stopped, realizing my error. This was not Japan, but Germany, my mother back home in Dresden or wherever she had managed to survive. I scratched out the mistake and continued. "And you in Germany are surely still boiling thin porridge, still giving your portion to my younger sister. I am ashamed, Mother, ashamed that as a prisoner I live with more comfort than you." Tears splattered the page, smearing the words until they bled like open wounds. Other nights I wrote to my old school teacher. "You once told us that America was crumbling, starving, begging for mercy before the might of our German spirit. But here, I see them throw away what we could never dream of having. They toss half an apple into the trash, while an entire neighborhood in Germany has not tasted fresh fruit in months. Teacher, were you deceived as well? Or did you know the truth and still feed us lies?" Sometimes anger surged through me like fire. I cursed the men in Berlin who had preached sacrifice while hoarding power, who had sent women like me to the front with empty promises of glory. I had once called myself a heroine serving the fatherland. Now I knew I had been nothing but a pawn in a rigged game. The deepest wound was not being defeated by the enemy, but realizing that my own nation had betrayed me first. Among the women in the camp, I saw the same transformation. Some sat in silence for hours, their eyes hollow. Others refused to eat, as if denying the enemy's generosity could keep their old beliefs alive. Still others broke down completely at the sight of chocolate or new shoes, their sobs filling the barracks. We no longer argued among ourselves. There was nothing left to argue. The truth was plain, undeniable. I remember one friend whispering, "Perhaps we are already dead, and this is the afterlife." I stared at her, unable to answer, for in the deepest corners of my heart, I too sometimes wished it were only a dream. Then I could wake and find myself back in Germany, hearing the loudspeakers promising that victory was near. But it was no dream. This abundance, this kindness, this shattering of lies, it was real, and reality was far more devastating than death. The letters piled up under my blanket. To my mother, my sister, my childhood friend, my teacher, even to myself. I folded them carefully, knowing they would never reach their destination. But I wrote them to confess the truth, that I had touched, tasted, and lived the very things I had once been told were impossible, and that the enemy I had feared had shown me more humanity than my own leaders ever had. One night, I dreamed I returned home. I ran to my mother, placed a white bar of soap in her hands and cried, "Mother, the Americans are not as we were told. They are strong, abundant, and they do not treat us like animals. You must believe me." But when I woke, my hands grasped only empty air. The cold seeped into my bones, and I knew no one back home would believe my words until they saw it themselves. That helplessness cut deeper than any wound. As time passed, I began to notice my body changing in ways I hadn't thought possible. When I first entered the camp, I had been nothing but skin and bone, cheeks hollow, ribs visible, hair so thin that bald patches showed on my scalp. Each step had been a struggle, my legs trembling as though they might give out at any moment. But after weeks of regular meals, something remarkable began to happen. I gained weight. My skin grew warm and pink again. My hair thickened, dark and shiny, no longer brittle. The dizziness that had once haunted me with every movement slowly disappeared. For the first time in years, when I looked in a mirror, an old foggy one in the washroom, I didn't see a ghost. I saw a woman with bright eyes, cheeks full once more, someone alive. The transformation was not only physical. In the beginning, fear had ruled every thought. I had been certain that every kindness was a prelude to death. But as the days stretched into weeks, and no execution ever came, that fear loosened its grip. In its place came something more complex: confusion, curiosity, even a fragile hope. I began to observe the Americans more closely, trying to understand. Why did they waste food when we treasured crumbs? Why did they offer us soap, socks, even shampoo, when they had no obligation to treat us kindly? I asked questions through the translator, learned the English words for simple things: soap, bread, towel. A guard laughed warmly when I mispronounced them, correcting me without cruelty. A nurse showed me how to tie the strap of my dress properly, her patience surprising me. Those small interactions opened a door in my heart. For the first time, I began to see them not as monsters, but as people. People who laughed, who worked, who showed kindness even to their enemies. Among the women, opinions were divided. Some still clung to denial, insisting it was all a deception. But I knew the truth was etched into my very skin. No illusion could make my cheeks round again, could banish the hunger gnawing in my belly, could strengthen my legs until I walked with steadiness once more. My body was proof. One morning, after bathing, I stepped outside into the camp courtyard. The sun fell warmly across my shoulders, my hair still damp, carrying the sweet scent of soap. I paused, breathing in deeply, realizing that I was no longer the trembling, starved woman who had arrived weeks earlier. I was still a prisoner, yes. I was still far from home. But I had escaped a far greater prison, the prison of lies that had once bound my spirit. The change in my body and my soul was undeniable, and it whispered a truth I could no longer ignore. A new life, a new understanding had already begun. Looking back on that journey, I realized that war does not only kill with bombs and bullets. It kills with lies planted in the minds of ordinary people. We, German women, had grown up believing that Americans were starving, barbaric, ruthless, and that as prisoners we would face certain death. Yet the truth I witnessed with my own eyes was entirely different. They gave us food, clean clothes, medicine, and, most unforgettable of all, a bar of fragrant soap placed gently into our hands. That moment when I stood beneath hot water, soap foaming across my skin, was more than just cleanliness. It was the washing away of years of deceit. I understood then that America's strength was not only in weapons or bombs, but in its ability to maintain humanity even during war, offering dignity to those it could have scorned, reminding us that we were still human. When Germany finally surrendered, I did not cry for our nation's defeat. Instead, I thought of my mother and sister, still struggling back home, and wished that they too could have touched that bar of soap, tasted white bread, and seen for themselves that the world outside was not as we had been told. From that day forward, I carried a quiet conviction. Borders can be drawn, nations can fight, but truth and humanity are the bridges that endure. And sometimes the greatest revelation comes not with the roar of cannons, but with something as small, as ordinary as a bar of soap. If there is one lesson I carry for the rest of my life, it is this: the smallest acts of kindness can destroy the tallest walls of lies. A single bar of soap, discarded by one side, became the proof that reshaped everything I thought I knew. And so I say to you now, if this story made you reflect on the hidden truths behind war, subscribe and share this video. There are many more untold stories waiting to be revealed in the episodes ahead.